As Old as Time, Part 1. Always the Bridesmaid. Belle stomped off over the hill wanting to run, wanting to maintain her dignity, not managing either. She kept up a strange fast march, in too precise a straight line that neither got her away from everything fast enough, nor let her appear to be unaffected by it. Behind her on the lawn by the side of the house was a wedding party. Her wedding party. It was beautiful, she had to admit that. There was a very tasteful canopy woven with sweet-smelling flowers, paper bells, and pink ribbons fastened a high arch. Tables were draped with shining white cloths and pink bunting, and spread with an array of savory delicacies. Silver buckets held bottles of chilled champagne. Perfect little beads of moisture covered their gleaming sides like pearls, like a painting. There was a band, which was actually kind of terrible, but enthusiastic. There was an absolutely amazing-looking cake. The only thing Belle was really sad to leave behind. It had 3 tiers, and its white and pink fondant perfectly matched everything else. Crowning the top was a tiny wedding couple, which she would have tossed aside, unexamined, in her haste to get to the cake underneath. Monsieur Ballinger might have been irksome in person, but his skills as a baker were definitely in top form that day. There was also a disappointed would-be groom sitting splay-legged in the pig wallow. She hadn't meant to push him that hard, but having done so, she wasn't precisely displeased with the results. The noise behind her was terrific. The squeaking of the blonde triplets, the squawkings of the tuba and accordion, which had no purpose, and the not quite sotto voce reassurances of LeFou to Gaston, the apologetic teeterings of the priest. For some reason, his presence upset Belle the most. She could almost dismiss the ridiculous band, the cake, the table, and everything else as all the acrimonies of the love-smitten madman, but a priest met Gaston was deadly serious. He had every intention of death do they part marrying her. Amour does not vincit omnia, you ignorant man, Belle muttered. When the woman does not omat, you back. She took a quick, undignified step aside to hide behind a scrub oak, then peeped out from behind it. Her heart sank. Besides the main characters in the wedding party, it looked like all the rest of the town had shown up to bear witness to Gaston's triumphant day. There was the silversmith, Monsieur Leclerc, Monsieur Hebert, the wig-maker and haberdasherer, Madame Baudette, the courtier, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick-maker. Everyone was there. Everyone except for Monsieur Levi. His absence was extremely notable. He knew the kind of boy she would eventually marry, if she married, and it certainly wasn't Gaston. Absent also was her father, of course, who was on his way to the fair, and her mother. But Belle hadn't seen her mother since she was a baby, so that part wasn't really so surprising. Drifts of conversation came to her as the breeze shifted. Terrible, but is it really surprising? The girl isn't right in the head. Turning down Gaston, the most handsome, eligible bachelor in town? Stupid hussy, I'd give my right pinky to wear his ring. Who does she think she is? Does she think she can do better? Maybe she'll try Duspois' son instead. You know, the simple one who counts pebbles all day. More her taste. Belle balled up her fists and threw herself against the tree trunk in rage. None of them thought she was good enough for Gaston, the town's favorite son, the most handsome boy, with the bluest eyes and the best physique, the best shot with a gun. No one ever asked if he was good enough for her. That was just the way the townspeople were. On the one hand, they had done nothing but gossip endlessly about Belle and her father, how odd they were, how odd she was, always reading, no friends, no suitors, how Maurice rarely came to the pub for a drink, how he didn't have a respectable trade, how his wife had disappeared, how some whispered he consorted with the devil down in his basement. Her father finally put an end to that rumor by inviting a select few to come by and inspect his house for evidence of demonic shenanigans. They had been carefully chosen. Monsieur Clerc, who knew a bit about technology and metal, and Madame Bassard, the town gossip, sure to spread the news of what she had seen. What they saw were half-built contraptions and engines of someone they immediately assumed was a madman. Later, Belle wasn't sure if she preferred the fear of villagers exhibiting before this experiment, or the pity and ridicule after. But on the other hand, there was Gaston, who, despite Belle's strangeness, came after her with the relentlessness of a crazed hunting dog after a boar. It wasn't like he overlooked the oddity of the father and daughter. It was more like it was irrelevant compared to Belle's status as prettiest girl in town. Plus, He felt he could fix her, make her normal. His overwhelming masculinity and presence would exercise her desire to read and think and be alone. Was there a tiny part of Belle just a little bit tickled to be the center of attention of such a handsome boy, the town favorite? Of course, yes. That cake looked like Ballinger spent a long time on it, but she would trade it all immediately for being left alone, for being treated by Gaston the same way the rest of the town treated her. The crowd looked so tiny from where she was. Belle backed away from the tree, watching the wedding party grow even smaller. In the strange honey-like softening of the afternoon sunlight, the scene looked both more brilliant and less real, like a miniature painting. She held up her thumb and managed to block out everything with its tip, erasing everyone from the landscape. It was like what she did when she read. As soon as she opened a book, this little town disappeared into a vast map of countries both real and imagined, the town people below cleaning up from the non-wedding erased by her thumb tip. Didn't think anything interesting or important lay beyond the next bend in the river. They had no curiosity about the new lands beyond the sea or the ancient lands to the east. They had no regard for the recent discovery that other planets had moons just like the one that smiled down at them. Belle wanted more. She wanted to see more. She wanted to travel to the lands she had read about, where people ate with delicate sticks, not forks. At the very least, she wanted to be carried there in her imagination. Belle lowered her thumb, and the townspeople reappeared. She plopped herself down on the grass, defeated. The truth was, reading wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't enough to catch a glimpse of these lands and ideas through the small window of the pages she turned. She wanted to step through and feel the yellow waters of the Yangtze herself, to hear the celestial music of foreign pipes, to taste the food described by adventurers who traveled purposely into the areas on maps labeled here, there, be Tigress. Looking at the west, there the late afternoon was drawing to a dark close. She didn't see the endless landscape that often set her dreaming. Instead, she saw the thick black clouds that stretched to the heights of the sky, roiling and boiling with wind and winking with lightning. Fine. It suited her mood. She clenched her fists unconsciously, wishing she could bring the storm faster, like a wizard or enchantress in one of her books. She wished she could stand up at the top of the hill in the midst of the winds and the thunder, untouched, alone, as all the would-be wedding guests fled for the safety of their homes. And then she remembered her father, who was somewhere out on the road heading to the fair. Guiltily, she unclenched her fists and forced her shoulders to relax, as if she really did have some control over the weather. She rolled onto her stomach and scanned the road as best she could, but either he was already too far into the forest, or the dust in the air had obscured him and Philippe and the cart. She sighed, and disorderly picked a dandelion. Under a protective tarp on that cart was her father's masterpiece, his finest invention. When fueled up and working properly, it would split a pile of logs in half, the time it took 2 men, an amazing achievement sure to win a prize. Belle puckered her lips and blew on the dandelion. Either you could see how many feathery sea pods were left stuck to the head and pretend it was that o'clock, or you could make a wish. She chose the latter. If Maurice won the prize, and if there was a big one, and if it were a big one, then maybe she could convince him to move to a bigger city, maybe even the one that he sometimes talked about, where they lived when she was a baby. There her father could spend all his time inventing, not trying to eke out a living for himself and his daughter among country folk who thought he was mad. And then Belle could have all the books she wanted, and no one would look at her as being odd, not in a city full of odd people. Or maybe some rich member of nobility would see his invention for the genius it truly was and sponsor him, take him and Belle away like a fairy godmother, and whisk them into a world of academics, science, and people just like them. They would be part of all the exciting things that this century promised, far away from this provincial town and its stupid ambush weddings. She was glad her papa wasn't around to see that. He would have gotten angry the way she had. He would have been merrily very, very confused. It wouldn't have helped things. She rested her head on her hands, watching the wedding party quickly disperse as the winds picked up. LeFou tried to grab a bunting as it whipped around the branches and chairs like an eel. The villagers would all be gone in a few minutes, but she wished she could head down sooner, somehow sneak around them, to be inside when the storm finally hit. Maybe she could try going down to the east side of the house, through the rose gardens. She sighed. turning to look at the pretty pink and white dots that molded into the scenery just out of the view of the wedding party. They were the main reason her father was reluctant to leave their little house in the country. Part of him still believed there was a chance that someday his wife would come back to her roses and her husband and her daughter. If only he just kept tending the bushes and keeping the flowers pretty and healthy, maybe she would be tempted to return. If they left, how would she find them? But despite the automatic watering contraption Maurice had built for the garden, the roses that were usually so healthy, blooming even in deepest winter, were beginning to look a little brown and peaked. Belle grumpily got up. She barely remembered her mother. She had the best father in the world. That was all she needed. She took one last look at the horizon, bidding the storm and the lands beyond farewell, when she saw a strange commotion on the road. It was Philippe, galloping out of control toward the house still attached to the cart, and her father wasn't in it.